Many of you probably know Justin as the founder of Twitch, which sold to Amazon in 2014 for $970 million. So a round of applause for that, I feel is deserved. But selfishly here at Workbench, as many of you know, we are an enterprise VC fund, enterprise community. And so Justin actually wrote this amazing blog post last year called Why I Love B2B More Than B2C. And when we saw that post, we were all bugging out here. So thrilled to have you here. You're now the CEO of Atrium, a legal tech B2B startup. He's officially joined the light side.
The light side, that's where I'm at.
And so before we kick off, I'd love to get a show of hands. How many of you here are our hoodies? So we've got startup founders, startup operators. Okay, great, so about 50%. Well, how about our suits tonight in the house? Okay, great. And other just Twitch fans? All right, awesome.
You can be honest, admit it.
And so, Justin, just so you know, this wouldn't be a true Workbench event without our signature icebreaker. And you're so honest on Twitter about everything and super prolific. So I feel like there's a lot we can see on Twitter. But what's something that you think most people don't know about you yet?
Something that most people don't know about me yet. There's something I have recently learned. I put it on my recently learned name tag, is how to communicate my emotions. I know that sounds pretty basic, but I've been able to go through my entire life kind of not thinking about them, always chasing like something new, something exciting as a way to kind of suppress my feelings around negative emotions or like sadness and anger and frustration. And so recently I've been working on being more in touch with my emotions and communicating them at home and at work. So I don't know, that's what I'm into now.
That's awesome, yeah. And again, huge round of applause for that. If you guys don't follow him on Twitter, that's your pinned tweet, I think. You're Feeling Good Justin program, so we'll dive into that. But with that, let's kick off. When we were preparing for this talk, you've been now 4 to 5 times, 6-time founder.
That just means I failed a lot.
Which is also awesome. But I wanted to just focus, let's just start with Twitch, right? And so I think a lot of people here are at least familiar with the story, the pivot from Justin.tv into Twitch to focus on gaming streaming, very glamorous success story. But what do you think was not covered at all, right? Like what was really hard about scaling and building Twitch that no one really writes about that you learned during that journey?
I don't know, we kind of covered it from every different angle, but I'll just give the high level. I mean, when I talk about the story of Justin TV, which is our original company, and then Twitch, I was a partner at Y Combinator for a couple of years between like 2014 and 2017. And I would use it as an example of kind of like if we could make a successful company the way that we did, none of you have any excuse. Because it was like basically the most ass-backwards way of making a company ever. Our original company, Justin TV, started off as like me and a couple of friends from college trying to create our own live reality TV show on the internet, which didn't work out super good at the time because we were programmers. We launched this, we invested all this time in figuring out how to create a live stream. And this was in 2007, right before the iPhone was out. There wasn't like very good internet, on mobile internet, all that was like not there. And so we built all this technology and then we launched this show to much fanfare. It was, covered by like Good Morning America and MTV and all these other like different outlets around the world because they were like, who would want to create their own like 24/7 show who would voluntarily sign up for that? This was like before Instagram and everyone would be social media famous. So we launched our show and then people would come and they'd be like, oh my God, this is the most boring thing ever. It was basically like, it was like 4 guys sitting on their computers in an apartment trying to program the website. It's kind of like a 24/7, and it was like a 24/7 like sitting around watching people on their computer in the living room. This is not good. So luckily, people came and they were like, oh my God, this is so boring. But I want to create, I want to create my own live stream. How are you doing this? And there was no live streaming on YouTube yet or anything like that. There's no Facebook Live. So kind of the light bulb went off and we were like, okay, let's create our own live video, like YouTube, basically, like a live video site for anyone to stream. And then that's how we kind of got our start with the real first idea or the second idea or whatever you want, however you want to count it. And then we did that for a couple of years and it grew and grew and grew. Mostly we were scrambling, trying to keep the site up. We didn't know anything about like engineering in a professional, like scalable infrastructure. You know, we were like right out of college basically. And so we eventually somehow taught ourselves how to create like a scalable infrastructure. That was everything from like racking servers ourselves and buying colo to, you know, building the site, which is like turned out to be one of the most like kind of the most trafficked Rails apps at the time. So it was like a top 250 website after a couple of years. And then the traffic was growing and then it stopped and we were like at a loss for what to do.
Right.
And when something's not growing on the internet and the internet's growing, you know, you're like losing market share. And so we could see the writing on the wall and we were like, this is not going to last forever. We had pretty much a very small company at the time. It was like 20 to 25 people. We were making money. We just turned profitable, but we weren't growing. So we were like, we're fucked.
Which is a consumer.
Yeah, it's a consumer
right?
thing. It's like your consumer app, like you're not growing, you know, there's no like, the only people who ever make money are like the head of the tail, right? Like everything in the middle of the tail, the long tail, is like doesn't make any money. So we figured we needed to pivot again. And my co-founder had this idea to focus on the gaming streams, which were less than 3% of the traffic on the site.
Right.
People were like streaming gaming. Most of us did not understand why anyone wanted to do that at the time, despite being gamers ourselves, actually. And so, luckily, my co-founder, Emmett, really liked those streams. He was like that was like his thing.
Yeah.
He was like, I hate all the content on our site. Like the entire site could just go to hell. I don't give a shit, but I really want to watch these StarCraft 2 streams. And that was back in 2011, so we agreed to like focus some of the company resources on that.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we finally, well, I mean, the big innovation actually after that was we were like, okay, let's go talk to these people and see why they're streaming. And so for the first time in like 5 years, we actually talked to some of our customers.
Right.
And yeah. And
our enterprise folks in the room. Right?
Yeah, we discovered that they, you know, wanted to be more famous and they wanted money. And so we tried to deliver those things to them and kind of built features around the gaming stuff. And then, you know, it was a pretty, well, I wouldn't say a straight shot, but it was like that's when we started, you know, kind of create that feedback loop cycle with the customers, and it grew and grew and grew. And by the time we sold it in 2014, it was 55 million monthly active users.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Well, so with that, you know, the journey was from 2007 to 2014, which is 7 years.
It was 8 years, yeah, 2006 we started.
So when you think about do you feel like that was too long, too short, just right?
Well, I mean, you don't really control that. You know? You don't control that, so you just kind of go along with the ride.
Do you think most founders you talk to today know, though, what to expect? Like this long,
Well, I think
7 years, right?
Everybody thinks that they're going to like create an app and then just, you know, be rich.
Yeah.
Which is an unrealistic expectation. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think people thought Twitch, you know, when we sold Twitch, they thought, a lot of people thought, oh, this came out from nowhere. They had just heard about it that year because of like Twitch plays Pokemon, or maybe their like nephew, you know, showed them.
Yeah.
But you know, we had been working on it for 8 years
a long
at that time.
Yeah. Is there one thing from your Twitch experience that you said to yourself, I'm not gonna ever do this again with any of my subsequent startups or companies?
Well, pretty much everything that we did, it was like a.
Well, then maybe that's a good transition to fast forward then to Atrium. Right, so you're CEO of a company now called Atrium in the legal tech space. A lot of that came out of the personal pain you felt opening up your invoices from lawyers, right, as a founder of a startup. So now you've raised, what is it? 75 million, investors like Andreessen and NEA, over 100 employees now. I'm curious when, you know, comparing your consumer life and now your B2B life, you know, what's great, what's not great about it?
Yeah, so I'd always started these consumer startups, you know, and kind of random. I mean, Justin TV was almost even just a project, not even a business, right? And so started consumer startups, and I played around in the last couple of years, or like between 2014 and 2017 with a couple other consumer ideas like music apps and video Q&A apps and stuff like that. But I kind of hard pivoted to like start this new company, Atrium, to be like a full service law firm for startups, right? And eventually enterprise. We want to grow to serve enterprises. And so the idea was kind of like Compass, but for enterprise legal, right? Like, so my observation was, as I was what I call an involuntary power user of legal services through my startup career. You can laugh, it was not funny at the time, but it was, I use a lot, right? We raised a lot of money, we did big M&As, we did IP stuff, and so I always felt like the delivery of those legal services was not super good. Like the service themselves, the service itself, like having experts tell you, give you their expert advice based on their experience, that was great. But everything around the delivery of the service was pretty, left a lot to be desired. There's no project management, there's no project management software, there's very little transparency into what was going on, and pricing was very opaque and kind of confusing. And so I felt like you could deliver a better experience by taking that legal expertise, but then combining it with more of like a startup where we build software to try to change the experience both internally for the providers and then externally as well. And so I'd seen companies like Compass and Ford in San Francisco's a healthcare provider that's like a full stack healthcare company get started and seem to resonate in the market. So I felt like someone could do that for legal, and that was the idea behind Atrium. I think so people were very surprised when I started this company because it's completely different. It's not consumer, it's legal. People perceive legal as like the most boring industry ever, unless they work in it. And so, for me, I've always just liked business ideas and liked learning about new industries and the application of technology to new industries.
Yeah.
And what I liked about, B2B generally, but then also like this having a kind of legal service specifically was that people need it. Like with a consumer thing, you're kind of just throwing random shit over the wall and seeing like, do people like this? I don't know. It's like basically buying lottery tickets.
Right.
And I bought a lot of lottery tickets in my life, and I only won once. And that didn't make me like any better at executing, like coming up with a consumer idea, actually. So like I, tried this video Q&A app, and I tried this bunch of music apps because I like music. I mean, you all probably like music, and I was like, it'd be fun to do something I like.
Right.
But none of them worked because it turns out that happening to trip across people playing video games and watching that was like, we're not geniuses, we just kind of won the lottery. Now we execute a lot, and I think I'm a hard worker, I'm a relatively smart guy, I have a lot of like, redeeming startup skills, but there was a component of luck in finding the right idea at the right time and riding that wave.
Yeah.
And so when
you talk about this in your post, right?
Yeah.
That B2B, you're in control.
Yeah.
Right? That B2B customers know what they want, and then B2B customers will pay.
Right. And you can kind of tell if they want it because they'll pay you for it.
Right.
If
Exactly.
they want it. If they want it, they pay you for it.
Core formula.
If they don't pay you, they don't want it.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's very simple.
Yeah.
So I felt like with now this kind of next go around, I was like, I didn't want the product market fit part of it to be determined by randomness, because I felt like, when you're a first-time founder or you're a young founder, you don't have any skills, it's good to buy lottery tickets, because like you're competing, like my competitive edge now, like Justin today and Justin like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it's like I don't have any edge in like coming up with like an idea. In fact, I might be like worse at coming up with a social or consumer idea because I'm no longer like in the zeitgeist. Now I'm like a out of touch rich guy. I don't know what people.
Line of the night.
I don't know what people want, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't know what people want. So, I mean, it's true, but
Sure.
like with an enterprise company or a B2B company, you can tell if people want it, right? It's a lot more straightforward, and it's much more about your execution and company building.
Yeah.
And what I liked about legal is legal services in America is a tax on every transaction that happens, right? Like, you want to raise money, you're going to pay a lawyer something. If you want to sell your company, you're going to pay a lawyer something. If you want to sign a major commercial contract, you're going to pay a lawyer something. And so I felt like people clearly, I guess, want in this case is a strong word. They need legal services because they want to get an outcome. And so we felt like there was clearly a market there. And then it was a matter of, can we execute something that delivers things better?
Yeah, and I think you're preaching to a lot of the choir here. I think there's a lot of founders here, again, building B2B enterprise companies who are talking to customers, right, and trying to get to customers as soon as possible, talk to the end users, the champions, and so forth. And a big part of what the drum that we've been beating here at Workbench over the past 6 years is trying to encourage more founders to start enterprise startups.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, after this post, do you feel like in the Valley it's still predominantly a consumer town? How do you think we can encourage more people to start enterprise startups?
Well, I wrote the post, so I did my part.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm done.
I'm done.
How has the feedback been? Do you feel like founders who come to you now for mentorship advice are B2B
Well,
founders
I
or
think
B2C?
that, I don't know, I would say I'm just like one small voice on it. And mostly I wrote that post as content marketing to, get some customers. So,
It's very effective content marketing.
yeah, so I don't know, I don't think
I'll
people
give
need
you
to be
that.
encouraged. Like, people are being encouraged by the successes that you can see, like with Zoom, and we were talking beforehand, like all these companies are IPOing, and they're all like enterprise SaaS companies, and they're very, in a lot of ways, they're more straightforward.
Yeah.
I don't think it's easier. I'm not saying it's easier, but it's a little bit more straightforward, and you can kind of tell if it's working or not. And so I think I see more and more enterprise startups happening. In fact, I think there's actually too many. It's like now everything is like SaaSified, and there's like 5 competitors doing any
No,
sort of-
everyone close your ears. You're not hearing
and
this.
every SaaS vertical, and then there's like the buyers. The buyers, I think, are like they don't necessarily give a shit what they're buying.
Well, actually,
That's not true of every category, but
right,
in
of
many,
every vertical.
right?
Yeah,
In
there's
many
still
verticals.
some green space. Well, that's, I think, a great transition, because I do think we meet a lot of phenomenal founders who may not have worked in enterprises, may not have worked
Yeah.
at very large companies, or may not have sold into large ones before. And so that go-to-market motion is actually a new muscle for a
Yeah.
lot of people, right? So selling, marketing, and that flywheel effect. And you've said in interviews that you think your superpower is selling. So I'm curious, how's that the B2B sale been going, and what are some things that you've learned around the go-to-market part of Atrium?
Yeah, so we're focused on actually pretty small companies, which is
Yep.
Startups who aspire to be big companies. So it's a little different. We have a few clients that are, I would say, more mid-market clients, but the majority of the clients for Atrium are small companies. The thing that is good is the motion is actually pretty quick, because when people want an outcome, they're like, you don't buy legal services without like some specific outcome and desire, right? You're raising a round of financing, or you need a new MSA or something like that. And so we found actually the sales process is a pretty straightforward process, which is good. And then what I think I'm particularly good at is I really like to understand the startup market. Having worked it my entire career, working at Y Combinator, I really understood like how do you create a startup community, how do you create like a startup brand. And so focus on that marketing side of it has been something I really enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And then I also enjoy talking to customers a lot, because I've always been like a startup founder, and I feel like I can help them and figure out their needs, not just on the legal side, but with everything else that they're doing.
And that's part of the growth hack, right? So one of the things, the programs you've launched is Atrium Scale, right? Where you go out office hours and advise founders,
Yeah.
and then they become Atrium customers.
Well, that's
right?
not necessary, but what we started off as well. At first, we were trying to, we were building this, legal service provider, and it was, we're doing this, doing a lot of startup financings. But when in the very beginning, one of my friends actually came to me, and he was, it's an interesting story. I tell it at Atrium Scale actually. He has a great company. His company is called MessageBird, and MessageBird is kind of like they're a text message and telephony service provider, API, based in Europe and the U.S. And so they were doing really well. He bootstrapped the company. It was like an amazing company, really fast trajectory. But he's having trouble raising money, and so he was like, what am I doing wrong? And I basically sat down with him, and I was like, you have to simplify your pitch. You need to really explain, simplify the technical details of the pitch. You're an expert, and you kind of got to step back from that.
Yep.
And so we practiced a little bit, and I encouraged him to go and practice. And then 2 weeks later, he'd been getting the runaround for months on his Series A, and then 2 weeks later, he had term sheet for $50 million. So,
Wow.
and
That's
then
quite the turnaround story.
yeah, so no, it wasn't a turnaround. He was already super profitable anyways, but
Yeah.
that's what he wanted to do. And the interesting thing was, then he was like, okay, I'll try Atrium. So I was like, oh, if I just help some founders raise money, then they will consider using Atrium as a provider. So we created this, at first I was just doing it by hand, like helping founders out, like some office hours and stuff like that. And then we were like, okay, let's just make this like a program, like a boot camp.
Right.
So now we have to run this like free weekend boot camp a couple times a year to help people figure out how to raise capital. And so it's also good for me because I like raising money too much. Most founders hate raising money, but I love raising money.
You're definitely in the minority, probably.
Yeah, I am.
Awesome.
Well, it's good and bad, right? If you raise too much money, then you get distracted. You maybe can try to solve problems with money. That usually doesn't work. It just creates a giant cash fire, and then the whole thing falls down like a house of cards, potentially. So it's not that good to always love to raise money, but I get to have my fix by helping other people raise money now.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. Give back keeps on giving. Well, I'm curious with raising money, right? Because I think so many of our enterprise startups, one of the things that I've seen firsthand that is challenging is hiring, right? So when you're hiring for an AI infrastructure platform versus Allbirds or Glossier, it can be a tough sell sometimes. So I'm curious, how has a team that you've assembled for Atrium look similar or different than that of Twitch?
Well, the team that we assembled for Twitch was kind of the pool of people who want to work at Twitch were the pool of people who wanted to work for somebody who was 26 years old and had no management experience, right? So it's kind of different. We had a lot of really high potential, amazing people who learned over that 8-year process, right? They learned a lot. I think what I've learned actually is people who are interested in consumer, people who are interested in enterprise are just different pools of people. Who want to work in consumer or enterprise, and actually that's fine. The one's not necessarily better than the other, but trying to hire people who from consumer and put them into this B2B company is hasn't worked as well as I would have thought beforehand.
Right.
And
so even though you as a CEO were able to make that transition, you think sometimes operators within a company?
Yeah, I think it depends on the role, really. It's really role specific. For certain types of roles, it might matter less, but for, I think, on the EPD side, the engineering product and design side, and then also the go-to-market side, it's very different.
Cool.
Actually.
Awesome. And then one thing I want to end on is you talked a lot about the role of the evolving CEO, right? And I think this applies to everyone here, again, whether you're consumer enterprise tech, as your company scales, your skill sets will also have to either scale or adapt, or you have to identify what's your strength and what's not. So what advice would you give to founders here on how to best identify maybe blind spots or weaknesses?
Yeah, I think the best, you have to, the thing that makes good founders and separates good founders and people who aren't as good, I think is just self-awareness and having a growth mindset. If you have a growth mindset, you're I can figure anything out, and if you have self-awareness, you can know what you need to figure out, right? And so I think that's kind of the basics, and people then ask me how do you get self-awareness? I don't know, but some of the things that have helped me actually, number one is doing 360 reviews with your team, and having some third party to facilitate 360 reviews, so you can just get that brutal feedback.
Yeah, well, I loved one a very tactical trick you had mentioned is the skip roundtables.
Yeah.
Right. So not only just doing a skip level one-on-one in which sometimes people may not be as willing to open up or senior to them, but the roundtables are actually great because then you're just creating an environment in which they're talking about what's going well, what could be better, right?
Definitely. So skip level roundtables, another great way to get feedback. I'm really a feedback, feedback junkie, I guess. I try to get feedback in everything I do. One of the things that I've started doing is in one-on-ones, there's an explicit section where it's we're both for me and the other person, and then the other person to me, writing and wish that, writing in a document every time. I like that you went above and beyond on this project and had radical responsibility around it, executing it. And I wish that, you would inform me 2 days before the project is due, what the stats is, whatever. But just building in feedback as a regular process, I think is super important.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I would say is you should know once you are self-aware about what you're good at and what you're not good at, you should just focus on what you're good at. And as a founder or CEO, especially for the CEO, you can make the job whatever you want. So you can operate in your zone of genius. So for example, the things that I'm good at, I think I'm pretty good at communicating with my leadership team. I think I'm a great salesperson, so any sort of sales function, whether it's selling internally, like internal all hands, or like recruiting, or raising money, or client sales, those are all forms of selling, right? And I think I'm like a pretty strategic person. Outside of that, I'm like bad at everything else.
Right, so you've delegated everything away.
So for example, like process, right? Like, just having consistent operating cadence over time. Not that good at it. I used to think that there was a set of things you're supposed to do as a CEO or founder or whatever, or like whatever your job is, right? CTO, any executive job, there's like a list of things you're supposed to do. And what I've come to realize is you're better off just focusing on the things you're good at and partnering with one or more people on the things you're not as good at.
Yeah, and I think you've been an incredible model of someone who's constantly trying to self-improve, right? And again, this manifesto that you've written online, this feeling good Google Doc that's online.
It's a Google Doc of things that I do for myself. So
well, you're
I'm embarrassed. It's not that good.
What I really admire about it is that, you're really passionate about talking about founder health and well-being and happiness and avoiding burnout, right? Which I think is something that we're seeing is really pervasive in the community, right? So I'm curious, what's the feedback been on that? Do you feel like it's getting better?
Yeah, I think there's more communication and conversation in the zeitgeist around how do you, around mental health generally. For founders, I think it's, you have to. One thing I always would tell my co-founder actually is that when he became the CEO of Twitch and he was kind of running it and he was stressed out, whether before the acquisition or afterwards, I was like, the most important thing is to retain yourself, right? Yeah. You have to like keep your own motivation up to keep working, and if you burn out, you're like not doing anyone any good.
Right.
And so I really believe that for founders, it's a marathon, not a sprint, and you need to like make sure that you want to be there every day. And so for myself, my journey was that I found, I kind of achieved a pretty large amount of success fairly young, and I realized it actually didn't make me any happier.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't any happier. I wasn't unhappy, but I wasn't any happier like in a sustained way. And after starting Atrium, it's been almost exactly 2 years. After the first year, I was like super stressed out again. It's like, oh my God, I somehow catapulted into running a startup again. And it's like, I had a very nice life beforehand, as an out-of-touch rich guy. I was like traveling around the world, flying into Y Combinator, and then like giving advice, and then I'd go on vacation, and then, and so I was like, oh my God, what did I do to myself?
Yeah.
And I was stressed out, and I realized I needed to do something to figure out how to like reduce my stress. So I started working on, changing my internal circumstances and my external circumstances. So for internal circumstances, that's things like I started meditating every day, gratitude journal, exercising every day, change my diet, try to remind myself that if I achieve some set of goals, it will make no difference.
Yeah.
And that made me a lot happier, actually. And then on the external side is really creating a company where, like I said, I could live in my zone of genius and partner with people who like doing the things that I'm not good at, and that's their zone of genius, and really just have an explicit conversation about how we work best, and then create an environment in the company where we encourage, kind of like radical curiosity. Like I was always a reactive person, like I'd see problems and be like, okay, I just need to solve this problem, instead of thinking really like what can I learn from this situation? Like what's the universe trying to teach me?
Yeah.
So just changing out my mindset of myself and my company, I think has been tremendously
so awesome. Cool. Well, I've been
yeah.
hogging too much time with Justin. Questions?
Oh, over there.
I'm curious, there's a couple established law firms that work with startups, and there's a recent trend of them taking equity in those startups. Is this something that you guys are looking at as well?
So the question was that there's a trend of legal firms working with startups, and they now take equity as part of working with them. So is this something you're looking at with Atrium?
I think it's something that, we've talked about is like, should we have an Atrium Fund and invest in startups, and a lot of startups want my participation, like whether they're clients or not. But really I want to prove that this is a business that exists without despite the boom or bust cycle in tech. And so it's important that the kind of economics of it work from a like actually what the customers are willing to pay in dollars. And so we haven't, I think it's a little bit of a distraction for us right now.
Yes, sir.
So you run a law firm and you also run a technology company. When you first started hiring lawyers from a white shoe law firm, how was the interview process? Why, when they sat down in front of you, were they surprised that they were talking to a technology founder?
So the question is, you're both a technology company and a law firm, and then you've had to hire lawyers, right, from all these white shoe firms. So a little bit of the process
Was it difficult
for hiring.
Yeah, so Atrium, so technically if you're law firms can only be run and owned by lawyers. And so what Atrium is it's a technology company that partners with a law firm that's owned by the lawyers. And they have kind of all the regulatory responsibilities that a normal law firm would have, and they deliver service like a normal law firm would. And what we do is, Atrium builds all these, the technology company builds a bunch of tools and processes and SOPs and stuff like that, and delivers them to the firm to provide, so that firm can provide substantially differentiated experience. When we're recruiting lawyers for this Atrium LLP, I think there's a class of attorneys, especially in the startup space, where they are kind of tired of not being able to innovate on delivery service. They like being lawyers, they like delivering, helping clients, but they found frustrating like all of the, I guess some of the trivial parts about delivery of service, like emailing Word documents back and forth and stuff like that, or trying to find documents in iManage or NetDocs, or just like feeling like that the clients weren't, there was like a misalignment between of incentives between the clients and themselves. And so we were able to resonate with like more entrepreneurial lawyers, especially in the startup space. And the legal team is about 40 lawyers right now. And so it's worked to some extent, and we'll see if that continues. I also think, like, last thing I'll say is, like, culturally, I think a lot of attorneys are used to working at a specific type of culture. In big law, I would say it's a fear-based culture, and what we're building at Atrium is a more collaborative kind of startup.
Yeah, it sounds like you're attracting the right type of people who are raising their hands for this type of opportunity. That's fair.
So, you mentioned kind of passion failures. In your experience now, have you seen some early warning signs that other companies may want to pick up on that things are really not heading in the right direction?
So you've seen a lot of failures. What are some early signals that you can see now if things are veering off course or not going in the right direction?
That's an interesting question. I feel like it's new learning every time you fail. Early warning signs. I mean, I think that if you're not growing, that's the most obvious one there is. I think that most people let their momentum carry them, or like their momentum of doing one thing, or like kind of one technique, or whatever they thought of, their strategy they thought of in the beginning, carry them even when it's kind of clearly not working, and they're so attached to that idea that they're not willing to like kind of rethink everything from the ground up. From first principles with like new information, and I've definitely been in that position myself, and so that's probably the thing that I think kills companies most. Like that's probably one thing.
Does any woman have a question? In the front row.
So my question is, I hear two components of the business model. There's the lawyers, and it takes to be so hourly billing. And then the second component is using technology to make their workflow more efficient. So I guess your margins and the fixed fee increase. And so my question is, how is that different from the fixed fee alternatively with providers like Axiom? I know Axiom probably may not serve startups, but they're providing lawyers at a fixed fee for some normal matters such as founding a company or whatever it is. So is it just because of the tech component? How is that different, and how do you compete?
Yeah, so questions around margins and the fixed fee. I mean, I'm oversimplifying it.
How are we
and
different
there's
than
also
Axiom?
other competitors and.
Yeah, so Axiom, doesn't really serve startups. They serve Fortune 500 companies. There's a different kind of, I think, attorney that's working at Axiom, which is someone who's kind of opting out of the. They want a more flexible schedule and stuff like that. And so we're really hiring people who are, cravat attorneys who are like trained at like these emerging companies practices, and we're being the primary counsel for startups. And so, I think if you ask like any startup here, like if Axiom, I don't think is even being that primary counsel for startups. And so it's kind of just like a different market, I guess. And then, I think they're building a lot of technology. I'm not super well versed with exactly what they're building, but, for us, it's a lot of technology that we use internally to make the process, our internal process more efficient, and then the clients use to kind of self-service various things. Yeah.
Okay, last question, since I know we want to give time to folks. You, sir, in the back. You.
Hi, Justin. Thanks for coming by. I'm actually an Atrium client, so
Nice.
Give this man a beer.
So I'm in the restaurant space. We deal with a lot of people that are like non-digitized, not in that. Like, so in the legal space, I figure, people we've dealt with in the past, a lot of them aren't like automated, they're not digitized. What percent of the people, like the legal teams that you like on board work that way, or what percent of the industry and that? And I want to know what processes that you guys are bringing in with the technology that is changing all of that.
You spoke very loud. It was great. So thank you for that. What percentage are not digitized of law firms, right? Yes.
I think actually it's on a practice area by practice area basis. Like some practice, like types of practices are much more operationalized and digitized than others, and it's basically usually correlates with the ones where there's pricing pressure from the clients. And so things like employment litigation, which is a more standardized process, or like there's like litigation discovery, stuff like that. There's certain like areas that have become where there have been pricing pressure from the buyers, and those ones magically get a lot more efficient. And so we think that there's a lot more opportunity, and not just like emerging companies, corporate practice, but also things like contract review and kind of like a deal desk and that's probably what applies to most people here. You have when you grow, or if you don't already, you'll have like a team of attorneys either internally or externally who do like all your contract review when you're trying to sign up these Fortune 500 companies, and that needs to be like a very streamlined process, right? Or it should be, because it's kind of a thing in the way between you and revenue, and so we think there's like that's kind of a natural thing that we're starting to do, and then there's like many different other practice areas that are much more productizable, I would say.
Awesome. Well, with that, Justin, you have to give a plug or a shout out about Atrium, your hiring.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding me. So you can help me. Yes. You can help me. And so you can help.
GIF of that.
You can help me with two things. Number one, obviously, we would love to have you as a client or any of your startup founder friends. But the other thing is I need to hire a head of customer success, kind of director level or above. That's like kind of my most important role to hire
in San Francisco.
In San Francisco, yes. And so if you refer someone to me, I will give you a pair of NBA floor seat tickets for the playoffs.
I know, he offered that to me first, and now I've opened it up to everyone, which is silly of me.
So that's what I offered internally in my company, and that's what I offer to you. So you can email them to me at justin@atrium.co, or if you have any questions about our service or anything like that, justin@atrium.co. And thank you very much for coming.
Awesome. Huge round of applause for Justin. Thank you so much. That was awesome. Thank you, Justin, for being so open and honest.
So thank you to everyone for coming to our last event at Workbench. For everyone, or for anyone who was here at January 2012 when we launched this meetup 7.5 years ago, we launched it coolly. Then Jess and I launched Workbench in mid-2013, and after building the space, the meetup moved here. Get very excited. The future is bright for the Enterprise Tech Meetup. We're going to take the summer off. We'll be back in action September 17th, and looking forward to the next 7.5 years, hopefully seeing many of you familiar faces here. So thank you very much.